Um, this next talk is about Curated in the Non-Commercial Space by Andrew, Nathalie Lawhead, Alien Melon, who I really like, and then Tolu.
Tulu Tumu.
Tolu.
You can call me Liz just.
Okay, Liz. So sorry.
No, that's okay.
I practiced earlier, but I failed. But yes, I'm gonna go now. So bye.
Hello. Yeah, so I am the aforementioned Andrew here, here with Nathalie and Liz, and we were talking about curation in the non-commercial space, which is, I guess part of that is the first idea of like what we each think of non-commercial, like I mentally think of like non-commercial is not the same thing as not for money, you know. At least in a increasing world that requires you to have money in order to live. I think of it in terms of not made with the intent of commerce, if that makes sense. Like, I think there's a certain kind of work towards like making a work with a market in mind, an audience in mind of like, I want to play test something so that what are the trends of the day? What are the patterns? Like, how can I take my feelings? I want to make a piece of art, and how can I turn it into a roguelike deck builder to the best of my abilities? And that's what I think of. But I will also ask my fellow panelists of Liz, how would you define non-commercial?
Well, a non-commercial game would be a game made by someone who really want to make a game. It doesn't matter the the motivation behind it. It will be someone who has an idea and wanna put it outside in the world. And I believe that it's the case for most people. I think if given the opportunity, anyone could make a game. And we are lucky we're living in a world where making a game is more and more accessible with more and more free tools for making game with little to no programming knowledge. So yeah, I will say it's a game made by someone who really want to make games.
Yes. And Nathalie, you as well, or?
Yeah, I kind of always viewed it kind of like functioning outside of the values of commercialism and capitalism. So with the idea that this is art and is contributing to a cultural conversation and not so much just there to compete and sell and be popular. And I think hobbyist space is full of that, and I feel like, you know, that's kind of where that value exists and thrives.
Yeah, like and then like, and so to bring it all back to the nature of the panel, like curating is a very broad term, almost associated, I think, with like museum spaces and festivals, but you know, anything is curation. Having, you know, you're an I mean, you, so both of you, to introduce you, I'm going to go backwards, opposite way this time. Like, Nathalie, you just have, I think it's called like the good stuff.
Yeah.
you're very reliable, just a list on itch, which is just like a list of very good stuff. And so curation is something as simple as that, or to like also the Museum of Screens, which is a whole giant website / project / online presence / whatever you want to call it, like a giant multifaceted.
Yeah, you can say like this, and also you can play the Museum of Screen right here.
Right, you can.
At Amaze.
If people have, anyone who hasn't checked out a Museum of Screens, how would you summarize the Museum of Screens? Right. To give you an impossible task very quickly on the spot.
It's very complicated because it changed a lot over the year, but today the Museum of Screen is an online exhibition to explore the history of games on the internet. It's a very broad term. I can talk about Flash game, I can talk about browser games such as Neopets and such, I can talk about the smallest project on the internet, as long as it's a game and it's playable on the internet with a download, it can be on the museum screen.
Yeah, because browser games, especially, like almost by the nature of like how they work, are like whether intentional or not, some of the most non-commercial. Because you like, how do you commercialize? It's very. I mean, you know, the various websites attempted. You know, you can plaster ads all around your thing, but like that doesn't like buried within the ads is still a free game that is like accessible for everyone to play. And I think you know, a big part of the non-commercial space is the easy access of the games. Of like, these are games that are generally, you know, they're free games. They're free, where hobbyist stuff is not, you know, like you said, not with the intent of commercialization and making a product, so to speak. It is like you both said, often a passion project, and passion project in games sometimes has a very, are treated as dirty words, and hobbyists, and I mean, this is a space where I think is obvious to people there's not the case. Like, this is telling to people who know that already in a lot of ways, but in the broader game sphere, it can very easily be like, oh, this person is just, they're very passionate about their games. I love your passion. They're a hobbyist. They're doing their practice games they release on itch every now and then. Eventually they'll put a real game out on Steam or a console. And I think that kind of like a lot of kind of like non-festival institutional curation tends to be focused. Games have a long legacy of consumer reviews as like, and that still is like the style of like criticism and review. I think is still, so much of its DNA is baked into consumer reviews. And like, is this game worth my time, worth my value of my hard, you know, my voting with my wallet, so to speak. But that limits a very, to a very small like fraction of games that you can find and select, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting too with both of your experience here, because like I feel like when we look back at the nostalgia of video games or the history of video games, it's always this mainstream narrative, like,
Yeah.
oh, Mario, okay, yeah, but there were other games, there were other people contributing to that space, there were hobbyists, there's all this movement, but it doesn't get remembered. You know, like when you say Flash games, you think of the ones that bubbled to the top and were a mainstream success.
Right.
So like work like both of yours, it's this creates this almost like a artist or hobbyist history of that space, and highlights that there was other things that contributed to this narrative and movement and to the games we have today, because like everything is a creative conversation, even mainstream things, and nothing happens isolated in a bubble. Success doesn't just happen because one person made something good. It happened because lots of inspiration and lots of work went up to leading to this one moment where something was successful. And I feel like hobbyist work does so much in pushing history forward, but it gets forgotten,
right,
because it didn't make the money.
Yeah.
So like both of you're creating like a record of this type of work that is usually just completely forgotten or lost, and it you know, puts it in this context of a history that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is exactly true, especially for the internet, because I feel like the most important aspect of the internet culture of the early 2000s were made by hobbyists, were made by people with no monetary goal in mind, who were just doing stuff because they wanted to and like it too. And this is the most important part of internet pop culture of this era, and this is also the most at risk of being lost today. We can see already with the shutdown of Flash, with countless Flash games that are at the risk of being lost or forgotten, or we can also see more recently the thing with Unity,
right,
that decided to squander their reputation with their own per user subscription or something like that.
Yeah, there are just as many. I feel like the graveyard of Flash games is like the graveyard of Unity web games is just as large. Of, you know, I have on my personal hard drive games like I've gone looking around before. Like, can I find these games on the internet still? And in some cases, I cannot. And like, I mean, can I find ways to contact these people? And there's like these, and they're probably, if people have been around like too long, like decades, and just like downloading games off of people's random websites, off of like, oh, you know, here's my Tigsaurus post of my game that I'm working on. And I wonder how many people have just like games on their computers, a hard drive sitting somewhere that no longer exists anywhere like on the web that is easily accessible, that maybe even the original creator does not have. And I think a lot of mediums, like there is an effort to, like those are like the goal is like, oh, I want to find these. I want to find these things that I want to dig through these record bins in this store and find some weird thing that no one's ever heard of, so that I can intentionally like bring it into a modern audience. And I think, yeah, like, you know, like you were saying, since games are an art form, and since like every art form, since its beginning, and with hobbyists had access to it, hobbyists were making games and posting them on forums or BBSs, or, you know, having them in little floppy disks that they had to bring to events and sell to people. And like the space has always been thriving, but it gets lost and forgotten so easily. And part of that is, I think curation, similar to reviews, is very in the preview cycle. Games love a preview. They love to hype up the thing that is coming out now. It's coming out in the future. And then when it comes out, it fizzles, and then it begins that slow decline to degradation and forgottenness, and you know, like you said, and just buries in game history. And then we remember the successful things that the big companies can afford to re-release and remaster and put on every new storefront as they come out. And to ask about the specific kind of like curatorial effort, like Liz, what are you often looking for when you're like looking through, like, do you just have, I'm blanking on the name of the program that has like all those, like the Flash emulator.
Oh yeah, the Flash emulator, Flashpoint.
Yes, Flashpoint, yes.
Yes, if you don't know, it's, I would describe it like a Steam for Flash game.
Yeah.
It's an interface, you just type the name of the Flash game you want to find, and you can download it and play it on your computer.
So what is do you have a process when you're digging, because there's a lot of stuff on Flashpoint,
yeah.
Or do you just kind of like surf by, like, oh, that sounds like an interesting title, or do you like trying to like, oh, I remember this?
It's a bit of both. I have a long, aside from Flashpoint, I have a long list of websites, especially personal websites from game developer, where I browse through their older title. Maybe they were Flash creator back in the day, or maybe they have links to games they enjoyed. And I am always on the look, in fact, to find any game. And this is true. There is a lot of game. I think on Flashpoint it's like over 1 million entries.
Right.
Easily. So going in it at random, I do it some of the time, but also I often ask people what were the games they remember back in the day. I really like to ask people that, to ask about their perspective, because sometimes my history with Flash game is very different from other people, especially with people from other countries that use different websites. As for myself, I use the Newgrounds and French Flash websites that just copied and pasted other creation. But from other country, people have way different experiences, games that were not localized in English or other country. There is so much, in fact, and I try to cover as much as possible, but I don't think I'll be able to even scratch the surface.
Right. A million, like even like at like even assuming the tiniest scale of the tiniest Flash game, 1 million minutes is a lot of minutes.
Oh yes.
I do not want to do the math real quick. I'm not going. For a second, I was like, I'm not going to do the math of that, but that is a lot of time. But talking to yourself, Natalie, I think like naturally, like artists and other creators themselves tend to be kind of like almost de facto curators because you are, curious about what other people are doing. So like, what is like, itch and the world of like self-publishing is wide. Your own work. I was gonna say predates. Itch has been. It's always been around longer than I think it has, but it's also not been around for that long. So tell me a little bit about like your process, like how you come across things. Are you just like, does it come across your feed, or are you following certain creators?
Yeah, it's stuff that coincides with my interests or what I'm working on. Like when I started with Electric Zine Maker, then I started seeing other people's tools, and then I started seeing how vast that entire space of like experimental tools is, and then then I started highlighting it because I feel like it gives your work legitimacy too if you can put it in a cultural context of what others are doing too, and it creates kind of a history, or like you start seeing a history of things that have existed before you and that led up to this, and things that could happen next and all that. And like I feel like just in general that's something that's really valuable to do as a developer, because you are also working to legitimize experimental games or this type of art by showing that others are doing it too. It's not just you in your room in isolated from the rest of the world. It's you're part of something. And I've seen so much now when I do this, the people that like my work go, oh my God, I didn't know this stuff exists. Oh my God, thank you for introducing me to this. Like it works, and you're contributing to creating this type of community around this type of work and fans for it, And I feel like if we had an understanding of developers that this is something we should do, like it's also a responsibility to highlight other people's work and, show how you fall into this kind of context. I think it would legitimize this type of games more and create help the audience find it and all that, because I think when it comes to game curation, it hasn't really been figured out yet, and I think it helps when developers show interest in this too.
Yeah. Developers are their own best fans of each other. There's that eternal quote of the indie game development is just passing the same $5 back and forth forever. And there is so much of it. You wouldn't think there, for instance, even get hyper niche, you wouldn't think that people are still making a bunch of desktop pets, but there are mountains of desktop pets, and like other these kind of like whatever niche you think there is, there's 80 other people who are already been working in it for years, and you just like are not aware of, like, it's like, how do you find each other in a space that is so like commercially focused? Of like, so many games don't fit into like the wish list to Next Fest to Steam release to Switch eShop release, dev cycle or whatever. Or don't show well online. I often am like, when I make trailers, sometimes I'm like, well, how do I show off a snappy 10 seconds of a text game? And I'm like, you don't. It's like, I guess I clicked on the screen a couple times, and I clicked on this Twine hyperlink, and like that, like so much stuff like doesn't show, like that social media has become such a nexus for attention. Like really limits a lot of like the kind of games that you're natural to see, because very few really pop well on social media. Like it just doesn't. I think a lot about something Melisantani said once, of the idea of if the first Zelda came out nowadays, it would get a 7 point. It would get a lot of 7 out of 10s, and a lot of social media managers would just say it wasn't gifable enough. And that is like a lot of games, especially like influential games, just don't like. How many people like at a maze are like, can like, oh, here's my TikTok presentation of my game. Besides the fact that it has to make the artist into the secondary advertiser and performer and all the stuff that is ancillary to the work. And I think that's where curation in non-commercial space, which is, you know, the commercial space often has people you hire to do that for you, you know?
Yeah. This is true that social media is a mess, but it sometimes can be good to promote their game, because I don't know if you know how many games are published on each every day. I tried to count them one time. It was more than 200.
Right.
So like impossible to play 1 minute of every game posted each day on itch.
How many itch games were published right now as we're talking, you know?
Yeah, before the end of the talk. Exactly. And social media can be helpful to share the game or to promote game around something that interests you. But also, curation is especially important because it can highlight very small releases that could very easily fall under the crack. A small demo or very small Bitsy game. There is a lot of very, very good Bitsy game. If you don't know the Bitsy engine, it's an engine that allows you to create a game with zero programming involved, and it's very, very good.
Yeah, and I think, especially something I think a lot about more recently that social media lacks is that a staticness to it. Like, maybe there's a really cool game, and then, like, even if I'm looking at it algorithmically, maybe I at this point in my life, mostly only use it on my computer. I'm not even on my phone anymore. So, like, how much stuff do I miss just because I'm not always there? But, you know, someone doing, like, an interview series, you know, like people like Critical and, like, other these individual, that's, you know, with a K and a Q, and you'll find it enough if you look for it. Doing like interview series and, you know, other websites like what was it, like Indie Hell Zone. I was like there's so many hell ones in there. I had to not conflate the two together very quickly. But those are like static websites and static recordings. So it's like, if you want to look for it today, it's as easy to find as it was yesterday. And it's search, and even on the increasing brokenness of like search engines, they're still searchable. Like, you'll still find old archives of things that I think the kind of like the content stream kind of loses. And I think a lot of when I think of like what curation means, it's static. So it's something you can always go back to and find, whether that is like even museum spaces that end. Like, a lot of times they'll have like, oh, these are past exhibits we had. So you can look up past exhibits, and maybe you can attend the exhibit, but you can see what was in it. Yeah, and there's a lot of space for just being able to find something, because that's the important part of curation is like, oh, well, how does a person find it? I think of the idea of, because it creates conversation, like between art or between creators, and like I think of the idea of like literally something is archived, of course, but like if something is archived on the Internet Archive, but nobody is talking about it, how archived is it really? You know, are we really saving it for history, or is it just a file that exists on a server somewhere? And you're talking about artists keeping in conversation with each other. I think is an important part of that. Whether you are literally talking to the person, or you can see glimpses of that person's work and your work as you bounce off of it and reflect on it.
Yeah, I feel like with the way social media has kind of failed us in a way, with, you know, how impermanent it is, and how it, you know, like losing Twitter, to me it's kind of shown how important curation is, or saving this stuff, because these conversations don't exist anymore, or, you know, like relying on these platforms that are controlled by a larger entity that, you know, it's a completely different type of internet, and it's kind of it creates a kind of culture where now is important, but yesterday doesn't matter. And I feel like we're kind of trying to come to grips with what it means to have relied on things like social media so much, especially when it came to curation, because we've lost a lot, and now we're struggling to try to maintain that and remember it and save it. And I feel like going back to the idea of like how older internet worked and how permanent things were, and how you know, like it really has to happen from people. You can't count on like a corporation or organization to do it. I feel like it's kind of a responsibility on everyone to do it, and to, you know, create, you know, lists or stories or highlight games and curate games, because you know, I don't think it's going to happen in a mainstream way.
No, I'm excited to see a lot of people come back to like the old web in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. Like I am seeing more and more websites that are like very like personally designed websites that are, you know, they're not like a WordPress template, you know, that is like, it's got like the, you know, a lot of people are going back to embrace the gaudiness of old internets, the beautiful clumsiness of sparkles and GIFs, and, but also like links to their friends' works. Like I had found so much stuff in the early days because I like this person and they linked to their friends' work, which in itself is a kind of curation.
Yeah, like the web rings that used to be on the internet.
Yeah.
And the wall of buttons to other websites. I've seen it coming about also. And
right.
I'm very excited for it.
Right, and that is similarly like a static thing, where it's like you might like someone, you might repost they're like, I love this game, I'm going to repost it. That repost is gone in 3 hours at best. Yeah. You know? Yeah. And like it is all this stuff that is like extremely of the moment, of right now. We have to care about this work right now, and if we lose it, then well, I guess on to the next thing. When I don't know, there is so much work that gets like, so much work to like rediscover things. Oh no, I'm blanking on their name, but I just watched a couple of short films by a filmmaker from like the 70s that got rediscovered like 40 years later, and she wrote a whole a blog post about it was a very good title. It's something like 40 years and like 19 million, et cetera, feet from stardom, about how many people, like how many artists are discovered years, decades after their death, even after they've stopped making work. And like curation, I think, is less about finding the like, oh, this is the perfect thing we need to sell. This is like, we got to get this thing to market. We got to get you your bang for your dollar. It's like, no, like finding and preserving important art. You know, I mean, and sometimes that is in Flash games. Sometimes that is in like what is the legacy of people who made like weird commercial movie tie-in Flash games for Neopets? You know, that's a whole. There were companies there were people who did that. That doesn't come out of the ether. Yes,
there is a lot of ad game made in the early 2000s about upcoming title, upcoming game, small Flash games that try to emulate console releases, like a lot of Flash Sonic games, surprisingly.
Yeah.
And this is something that not very often discussed. And I love to come across some of those games because when they were made just to be available for a few months, then deleted. And the simple fact that it's still available today, it's a nice time capsule of the moment. It's very, very nice.
Right, like you know, a time capsule. What movies were so important that they should have a Flash game? And like, how many of these movies, like what was that movie? What was it about? Like, and then but he's like, I guess it was important enough to have a Space Invaders clone that you could earn 100 points on Neopets if you played.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is like, and there's like so much of that stuff is curation. Also, I think. Kind of implicitly includes like the remembrance of the people who made the games, which games, what I was saying, has a very bad habit when it comes to crediting people in general, and acknowledging the people who made games. You know, all the I looked as a bit of curiosity on like the Game Awards one year, and I looked and like, well, let me look at who is credited for these like best game, and it's all studios and companies, and then voice actors and musicians. And I'm wondering if that is a union thing on their part of like SAG-AFTRA stuff, where it's like, no, if you give me an award, you can't say that I win like God of War studio won the best actor. You have to say I as the actor won best actor. But in games, like it is like, oh yeah, who made Elden Ring? Namco or whatever, or From Software, whoever they decided was the most important company to highlight that moment. But there are like level designer, like I wish people knew level designers in the same way someone will know like a director of photography, you know, or like an album producer. And these are all like extremely important roles, and it also would help people like in their careers if they could be like, oh yeah, I know you're that level designer, you're that audio engineer, that technical animator, you know, and curation, because who knows who made like self-publishing is handy because we know, unless they're going by a pseudonym, we generally know who made the thing because their name is on it. But like, and so many things where people's names weren't on it, like especially old Flash stuff. For companies, you're like, who made this? Who made the Marley and Me to tie-in Flash game?
Yeah, archiving is very important, and I'm glad to see a lot of Flash games hosted on like Flashpoint or the Internet Archive, but a lot of those games lack credits. They were games that were copied from a website, then reposted on another website, and several times until it's on the Internet Archive with no credits, no year of release, no other context, and yeah, it's kind of a shame because for archiving purpose, it will be more interesting to have the name of the person who made it, if it was on his other personal website, which context, and yeah, like you say, the movie tie-in or the commercial game tie-ins that were made, like I'm not sure that Sega made this Sonic the Hedgehog, Tic-Tac-Toe, or Tetris-like.
Yeah, it was likely not Yuji Naka sitting down at Flash, going like, how do I get this guy set up so I can make my Sonic Tic-Tac-Toe game?
It's really interesting that you mentioned credit and with archival and curation, because I feel like credit kind of speaks to the labor issue games have, where it doesn't respect labor.
Right.
You know, like it just doesn't, like everyone is expendable. And like curation is such an important work of giving, you know, kind of credit back to people that might have been disenfranchised of it. Like, to me, a really big illustration of that is like Disney had this Flash Games portal, tons of them, just constant stream of Flash games. Like just, I made a bunch of like, they asked me to make Hannah Montana games, so it was like a Bejeweled clone with a theme to him, and you know, like whatever, you know, it's easy money. But I made that. I wasn't credited, it's fine, you know, they paid. And then there was a Princess Jewel thing with, you know, Snow White or whatever. But like, I made so many of those, and you know, yay, you know, you know, cash in, done.
Right.
But like, and then the portal closes, and like, it is such an interesting thing because those games, they had an entire process. Like the Bejeweled clone that was handed to me, I retheme it, you know, but someone else made the clone, and another studio made that, and another. It's like you ended up with this breadcrumb trail of people that worked on this,
yes.
You know, and now you're doing it, and then okay, cool, and like there was this whole, you know, freelancers and all sorts of people, this whole structure involved in making these games, and just out of the blue, it's all gone. Like that entire structure, that entire, the studios that did it, you know, like nothing, and no one was credited for it. It's like these games never even happened, and they just exist in someone's memory, maybe if you were a Hannah Montana fan, you know.
Yes, yeah.
So and then like seeing the work from like curators digging this stuff up, trying to figure it out and understanding it. I feel like that there's such an inspiring thing there where it's like. Validating that this stuff mattered and was appreciated, and it actually doesn't just happen out of the blue because Disney makes games and no one knows how that's done, you know?
Right.
And like, I think it's kind of a way of also validating that the people that make games matter. You know, it doesn't matter what
Right.
kind of game it is, it matters that it existed.
Yeah, there is a lot of artists, you know, very, it would be a terrifying percentage to look at like how many percentage of artists are actually like one, doing art full time, and two, doing the harder thing, doing their own personal art that they own full time, you know. I assume that is a very tiny, tiny number, but they still like, you know, I learned today that you had made a bunch of Disney Flash games, you know. There is like so much like, you know, but that is like, you're still, you know, in the art space, and there is like, that itself is like a small, like, I'm like, you can see someone like, oh, okay. Like you could see someone in that moment saying, oh, that pipeline, I hadn't thought about that before. Let me try and, okay, here is one link. Let me see if I can find the other links in this chain and see who else was like, who was the person who was making that Bejeweled clone? Where are they now? What are they doing?
Yeah, like looking at when you worked on those Flash files, it was so funny because you saw this, it's almost like little notes of credits of people
Right.
that worked on it, like little I was here, you know,
Yeah,
with the made by this person, this code is made by that person, you know, like it's so funny to look back on that and like just think like, yeah, but that's all forgotten, you know.
Right. And even if it was like, you know, source code viewable, that's not a thing most people think to do, you know, to go and see like, oh, look at these little credits that are hiding in there. But even in Flash, like most people, that's probably not publicly accessible. That's something you are seeing when you're given a file to reskin and go, oh, look, hey, the person that came before me and made this little clone. And then I am like, you know, I think there is a lot of, you know, people love the superstar developer, you know, the highlight, like, oh, look at these games this person made. But I think I'm a deep perspective of the workmanlikeness of art, you know, that it takes a ton of people to make a ton of games, and it's not, plenty of times, not the games that they were like wanting to make, but you know, it's like, you know, actors doing commercial work, you know, it's gig musicians, it's like doing illustration work for just like companies and restaurants and just like little side things, like, oh, I am practicing my craft, but it's still like a summation of that, all of that person's work. And I think, you know, curating a lot of people that work in the non-commercial space, like finding like they have huge bodies of work. That is often not even just like the stuff that is self-published. There's a lot of stuff they do on the side, a lot of stuff they've, you know, or just like cross-collaborate with other people, and helping to create these spaces to find and like properly archive and curate people's work, I think is, you know, obviously an extremely important thing, but it helps provide context where games like, you know, how many times a year does somebody reinvent the visual novel for the first time, you know? They're like, oh, I'm doing this. Did you know you can date things that aren't people? People are still doing that in 2025, as if it's a novel concept that was, you know, ideas that weren't explored like a million years ago. But I think a lot about visual novels because they are a often disrespected genre, especially within like, you know, English language, like mainstream games press and games like culture, whatever it is now between influences and press and just like hype cycles, you know.
Yeah, visual novel and text game, like
Yes,
you
you're
said previously, they are text game are very hard to promote in the internet. On social media, they are focused on videos and picture. So this is true that we have to find other way to promote,
Right.
to find interest in. This is a very cool game, but I cannot show you any picture because it's just a wall of text.
Right. It's like, oh, I guess that is a very cool looking text parse, and I really like that paragraph that's written there. But you know, that's where things like IFComp come in.
Yeah.
Which is, IFComp is what, like 15, 20 years been running? But they are these, you know, important like curated spaces about like like I think part of curation is like focus spaces of like games have a large problem of they need to be everything, but they're like, but it's like if you're like no, I mean, and people get into the minutia of like there's especially beyond the scale of this talk and the time you have to talk what is IF and what is not IF is well beyond the scale of anything I ever want to get into, but having like very focused curated spaces of like yes no this is. IF Comp is all IF games. Museum of Screens is all Flash games, or Flash adjacent browser-based games.
A little bit of everything. I also have a text game on the Museum of Screen, even though they are not very well represented. Again, because my museum is dedicated to screens, so picture.
Yes, right. And sometimes some things don't show well, like. Events and it's something I have to run into of like how do you demo like events are like one of the best ways to get people directly because they're there for the games there, but then some games don't like you really need to sit with this thing for sometimes like hours to like really like work with the game and understand it, and that like where like sometimes it's hard to find like you just need to find a way to like, okay, a person needs to sit down with us and play it. And sometimes we're like having a curated list or a website and just like a list of good stuff is a good jumping off point for people to, oh yeah, I'm going to spend the time with this work, But as we getting close to the end of it, I want to, if either of you have anything crucially pressing to get out, so we don't lose it, for time. I'll start with you, Natalie. Do you have anything like I need to say this before our cutoff has come?
Yeah, I guess it would be that I think it's really important for game developers to also participate in curation and highlight other people's work, and because this is something that everyone can do and contribute to, and we're our own answer, I think. Right, like it's easy. It's like having your own website and being, these are my friends, or oh, my game was influenced by these other games that came before it, or like, oh, you should check out this game. These are, and that like, it doesn't sound like, curation sounds like a big important word, That's something a gallery does. That's something a noted critic does. But any person can do that. It's just pointing people towards something. Liz, any crucial last minute statements?
Earlier I said that too many games were released on each every day, but I don't want to say it's a bad thing, because I think it's wonderful that more games than ever are getting released today, and I encourage everyone to try to make games because it's easier and easier to get into game development, and I believe that more games in non-commercial space is always good. When it's not competitive, like in commercial releases, it's always good to see so many new perspectives and so many new voices and viewpoints in the world of gaming.
Yeah. I mean, the tools being easier and easier, and like the graphic requirements going down and down every single day makes it easier for literally anybody anywhere in the world to just publish a game. And then, before the existence of game, there was too much art in the world. If you were some weird completionist and you need to experience everything, bad news for you. Before they made games, let me tell you about books. They've been making those for a very long time. I don't think you can manage a centuries worth of literature. Our lives were too short. We were born too late to experience all of those. And games are that's similar. And in the same way, like, curation can help you find your niche. You can help you find, like, yes, I love Flash games. I love IF. I love like visual novels. I love I love roguelikes. Let me tell. Oh, I forget the name of the event, but it's something. I think actually it happens in Germany, right? The Rogue conference. I don't remember. I'm not.
I don't either.
I know there is a Berlin interpretation, I think, the quote unquote, of rules for Rogue. But yes, thank you all for stopping by and listening to our talk. Thank you. Have a good rest of a maze.
Thank you.